Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Free Read Fridays. Sorry about the delay. I just said that. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggeth, and today we're going to be reading through some more of the Ascension Factor by Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom. Let's see. Rather a lot of important things happened last week. So we got, what's the biggie? So Queets Twisp is one of the leaders of basically the underground resistance that has arrayed itself against, to resist Raja Lawn, Raja Flattery, the Director. Basically they're deciding whether or not to engage in active, violent hostilities against him. And Queets Twisp would rather they not do that because the loss of life will be even worse than it already is. However, one of the people there, one Kaleb Norton-Wang, if that last name seems familiar to you, there might be a reason for that, is rather more set on a rather violent course of action. And Queets Twisp wants to take him aside and be like, hey, buddy, listen, I was best friends with your parents, and their deaths really messed with me too, but I think we can get through this without too much unnecessary bloodshed. But Kaleb is understandably somewhat peeved at the director. Has a bit of a bent, a hell bent for vengeance mentality right now, and it's totally understandable. Let's see, other things. Dwarf MacIntosh has successfully rescued Beatriz Tatoosh. Unfortunately, Captain Brood is still at large on the station, which could be bad for absolutely everyone because he is desperate and crazy enough to do something crazy and or desperate. The final thing that has happened, though, is that Ben, Ozette, Crista Galli, and Rico LaPush have been transported from being stuck in the kelp field by Hylighter to a rocky outcropping. The Hylighter crashes, basically, so it's deflated and done. But they are, unfortunately, in hot pursuit. They are being hotly pursued by, words matter, Spider Nevi and Zentz, who want to get them. As far as we know, Crista Galli and Ben are still pretty much out of action, though. But we are going to pick up right where they left off. So just give me 1 sec here to get a little water in my mouth, and we will get rolling. That's all ship ever asked of us. That's all warship was meant to be. Find your own humanity and live up to it. Caro Peniel from The Clone Wars. Rico sprung the galley hatch with a crowbar from the tool locker and saw Ben sitting up, fumbling with the catch of his harness.
"Ben, buddy!"
He stumbled over the crumbled deck to Ben's couch, but was careful not to touch him. Ben's merman-green eyes seemed clear when they looked at him, but they weren't tracking all that well. Both Ben and Crista were half buried in debris from what was left of the galley.
"Can you talk?"
Ben's voice caught in his throat.
I think so," he said.
"Sit back," Rico said. His own head started a strange buzz, so he took a deep breath, let it out slow.
"We're not going anywhere for now, so relax."
He hesitated short of unclipping the last two restraints.
"Crista,"
Ben's voice sounded foreign, distant.
"Is she all right?"
Rico felt his lips tingling and his fingertips, too. It was just like Ben to think of someone else first. He glanced over at the other couch. There was no movement. All the lights in the galley were out, but from where Rico knelt in the rubble, it looked as if she wasn't breathing.
"Shit!"
"Sit back," Rico repeated, pushing Ben back. "I'll check." His muscles didn't work quite as they should, and he felt as if he were moving in slow motion. The heavy rain that pelted their foil dimmed what little light seeped through the single uncovered port. Rico noticed that the shadows weren't just shades of gray, but dancing hues of blue and green, backed up by flickering tongues of a cold yellow flame. A halo of yellow flame surrounded the prone form of Crista Galli. Rico couldn't see any movement, but her lips were pink, and that gave him hope. He moved to check for a pulse at her neck, then backed off. He couldn't bring himself to touch her. She lay still, absolutely sagged, her mouth a little open. The inflated dive collar kept her head back and her airway clear. Even this way, Rico had to admit that she was beautiful. For Ben's sake, for the sake of the hungry people of Pandora, he hoped she stayed alive. As he watched, a green glow smoldered over her body. A fainter glow, also green but lighter hued, came from himself. Pockets of green oozed out of him, and, amoeba-like, they crept the air. One of these joined with a similar pocket oozing away from Crista Galli. She was alive, no question about it. Now all he had to do was keep her that way.
"Rico?"
"Yeah, Ben," he said. His voice sounded a long way off to himself.
"But it's right here. My voice is right here."
"Is she all right?" Rico breathed in a deep breath, and some of the lime-green glow sped into his lungs like fog or dust.
"She's okay," he said, fighting for control of his tongue. "Flattery gave her drugs a while back."
I find it interesting that there's some similar imagery at work here between this and some of the Area X series. Rico turned slowly and saw his partner backlighted by the one piece of uncovered glass. Uncovered plaz, my bad. The rain that spattered against it struck sparks that shot out from Ben and ricocheted around the galley. Ben sat up, rubbing his eyes, and a roil of fire moved with him. It was not the blue-green glow that captured Crista and Rico, but a sensuous warm glow like the throb of some membrane from the inside.
"The spore dust. I think I'm dusted," he told Ben in his new, slow way. "How do you feel?"
"Headache," he heard Ben say. "Hell of a headache." Ben's speech was thick and slurred.
"And my muscles don't all want to go right, but they work."
"Oh, sorry. And my muscles don't all want to go right, but they work. That shot did it." Rico helped him sit up. Their two halos arced and whirled around them. Ben held his head between his hands, doubled over nearly to his knees. "I see what you mean. I'm starting to feel a little dusted myself. Long time."
"Yeah,"
Rico said, letting out another slow breath.
Long time. With Crista, it's drugs. Flattery's drugs. Drugs. Yeah, Ben said. She's been laced up with something. Something that flattery wants people to think is kelp juice. Figures. Ben stood on wobbly legs, holding Rico and the bulkhead, and made his way to Crista Galli. Rico watched as Ben checked her pulse, bent to her breathing. She's in there, Ben said. If she's like I was, she can hear us, too. He leaned down to her ear. You'll be all right, he said, and patted her arm. Rico hoped it wasn't a lie. Some panicky feeling in his gut told him that none of them would ever be all right. The green of his aura sucked itself tight against his body. When he stuffed his unease away, it crept out from him again and mixed with the others. The drugs are the danger, not her touch, he reminded himself. How long before they wear off? Rico knew that a single dose dusting didn't last that long in real time. He would have to remind himself that it was the dust that warped time. He knew they didn't have much of it to spare. They could count on help from the kelp. This was something he felt, intuited. It's the dust, he thought. We'd better see what we have left, Ben said. Rico forced himself to focus. He knew Ben was right, and if they were both dusted, then they both had to pay attention. If we don't pay attention, we're dead, Rico heard himself say. Ben just grunted. Rico pulled the laser gun from his belt, checked the charges. They'll know we're down, he said. We have to get out from under this mess. We're too easy to spot. He braced himself against the upside-down bulkhead. Things were tough enough without all of us going to dreamland. Rico started out the buckled-in hatch. Bring me some dust, Ben said. That's what we need to get her out of this. No way, Rico said. She's had enough right here. We don't know what flattery's been doing to her. A heavy dose might kill her. You don't know. He heard his voice going on without him. Ben was insisting that he was right, that she'd already been dusted and it was bringing her around, and that what she needed was more. I'm serious, Rico. She needs it, and the antidote, you saw what it did to her. Think about it. Rico didn't understand, and he knew they didn't have time to think about it. He didn't say anything more, just turned on his heel and picked up Crista's legs under the knees. Ben reached under her arms, and they stumbled with her through the hatchway into what was left of the cabin. A few of the lights still worked, illuminating the burst-in walls and ceiling. The galley and aft portion of the foil remained upright, but the boat was twisted nearly in half at the cabin hatchway. The entire bow lay on its side. One of the wings had sprung from its retraction bay and sliced into the fuselage, peeling a section of hull away like a rind. Ben brushed away debris with his feet, and they set Crista down. She called his name and gripped his arm. Rico went immediately to work trying to free them from the deflated Hylighter and the wreckage. Some pockets of undissipated hydrogen worried him. The rain helped, but he worried about sparks. Not the spiritual kind he'd seen in the galley, but the metal-to-rock kind that might flash the hydrogen. There's still some gas around here, Rico warned them. It shouldn't be a problem, but we should be careful. Our judgment's been dusted too, so we have to be extra careful. Don't move around much until we're free. Rico's legs stood in the fuselage rip while the rest of him worked at using the wing section as a shield to push the dead Hylighter away from the foil. With his head and shoulders in the open, he could see that the foil lay next to the cliff, with the Hylighter spread out between the foil and the sea. A small flap of the bag and 2 tentacles covered the foil. The whole scene whirled in a light show of spore dust. No gas out here, he thought. A good offshore breeze. Rico smelled a greasy char, sickly sweet, as he burned through the Hylighter flap with his laser gun. Peeling it back from the fuselage made him even more lightheaded and wobbly-kneed. A thick, steamy smoke filled the cabin, and Crista coughed behind him. "Crista!" Ben's voice sounded happier than Rico had heard it in a long time. Releasing the flap of Hylighter let in some air and some light. The rain had muddied most of the dust, but they'd still had a pretty stiff dose. Rico's head felt as if it was ready to take a big plunge, as if he was clinging to some giant fluke just before it sounded for the deeps. He kept reminding himself aloud, "We've been dusted. It will pass soon." He ducked back inside, and Crista leaned on one elbow, coughing and gasping, and shook her head. "Ben," her voice was gravelly and deep, "we are saved. Avada will see to it." Just then, a tentacle slithered through the hole above them. In less than a blink, it snaked around Rico's waist, and in another, it snatched him through the hole. Its grip on his waist was stronger than anything he'd felt in his lifetime, but it didn't hurt. He heard a shout and felt a grab from Ben. Then the hole and the foil disappeared from sight, and Rico couldn't see anything but water.
Therefore, if it was more necessary in those days to satisfy the soldiers than the people, this was because the soldiers had more power than the people. Today, all rulers find it more necessary to satisfy the people than the soldiers, because the former now have more power than the latter.
Machiavelli, The Prince. Holomaster Rico LaPush was a fine prize indeed. The Immensity respected this human LaPush as a sculptor of images, the best that the humans had ever mustered. For nearly a decade, the Immensity had monitored human transmissions in all spectra. Through these transmissions, it witnessed the inevitable unraveling of human politics. When it had its own data to compare, it compared, and it found significant facts wanting. From humans, it learned to lie. Then it learned the subtle differences between lie and illusion, truth and illumination. The Immensity intended to learn holography. On its own, it had mustered transient illusion at times, ghost ships at sea, phantom radio transmissions, the parlor tricks of broadcast. Holography was more precious than that. The Immensity knew humans now and human history. It knew that holography, the pure language of imagery and symbol, would become the interspecies tongue. There were the other forms, of course, electrical voice talk of the humans. They spoke to each other of fish concentrations, weather, delivered the mysterious modulations that humans called music. Except for the music, this had been easily understood, but not very interesting. Then the human they dared call Kelp Master began using the kelp itself as a medium of conduction. This private communications channel linked the orbiter with the Zavatan world, and the kelp heard everything. The Immensity spoke in pictures, and these words over the kelp channel helped weave a picture of the world as it was, and as it could be. Though the kelp master listened, he lacked the subtleties of holography that the Immensity required. The Immensity could think of no better place to start than with LaPush, the Holomaster. The Immensity knew good holos from bad. In this matter, it would apprentice itself to Rico LaPush. The Hylighter tentacle that gripped LaPush was, in turn, gripped by a huge frond of blue kelp. It transmitted every move directly to the kelp. Rico's automatic lapel camera unreeled a 10-second broadcast every hour, beamed back to its recorder in the foil. The Immensity received all broadcasts, including these. Flattery was the dominant human, but the Immensity saw no future in him. He enslaved the kelp, but worse, he enslaved his own kind. Flattery didn't trust any creature that might know what he was thinking, including humans. He had plans to hide the future of a world from its people, and the kelp noted a heavy stink of greed about him. Except for the kelp channels, flattery controlled communication among humans. He discouraged it as he discouraged their education. The kelp often marveled that humans survived themselves. They appeared to be their own fiercest predator. Flattery would sacrifice many to save himself, it realized one day, perhaps even to the last human. The immensity harbored no illusions about its position in flattery's hierarchy. The kelp knew that as long as humans accepted flattery as the director, they would never realize their potential as one. If they did not do this, then neither would they recognize the need for oneness among the kelp. Flattery saw this need as a threat in humans and kelp alike. There would be no true Avata again as long as flattery ruled. Whenever the brain grew, flattery dealt it a stroke. Since the Day of Insight, the immensity had set about the downfall of Raja Flattery and the unity of pruned-down stands of kelp throughout the seas. The answer, it knew, was in holo. If it could project holo images, it could communicate in a way that humans would understand. It could speak to distant humans and to kelp alike. A language between sentients, the immensity thought. This is the Pandoran revolution. Rico LaPush had been difficult to follow. He moved quickly and undercover and spent most of his time landside these days. He'd been exposed to the kelp from organic islands that were the old cities and on assignment with Ben down under among the mermen. Still, he had chosen not to communicate directly with the kelp throughout most of his adult life. It is simply a matter of privacy. Unlike Flattery's political fear of betrayal and death, Rico's was simply a reluctance to let the kelp eavesdrop through his psyche. It did not make him feel at one with oneness, as it did many of the Zavatans. This the immensity knew. What the kelp knew of Rico it had gotten from other sources, and from the airwaves of holovision. Perhaps the holomaster Rico LaPush would become the kelp's battlemaster if the image alone was not enough. Timing and presentation of images were essential. As a kelp channel, a simple conductor, the immensity allowed itself to be used by the faithful in their struggle with the director. Now it was time to use them in the same struggle. The immensity would win over other stands and re-establish Avata as the true governor of Pandora. It planned to help humans win over flattery and to come to some symbiosis with these fearful humans. Oracles and kelpways were not enough. Images were tools beyond value, and the kelp would learn to use them. Seeking visions in the kelp violates civil rights, Flattery had proclaimed. If your son uses the kelp, then he and all who use it, including the kelp, know the most private thoughts and dreams of your youth, of your entire life before his conception. That constitutes mind rape, the ultimate violation. He passed his law making contact for the purposes of communication, an offense punishable in varying degrees, all of them unpleasant. The Zavatans universally ignored this law, much to the benefit of the kelp. The immensity had to snatch Rico quickly before he alarmed the others. The enemy Nevi approached, and there was no time for petty confrontations. The immensity had appropriate reverence for the kelpling Crista Galli. She would be the instrument that would complete the symphony of the kelp. But without Rico's genius, the kelp saw hopelessness, death, and despair in Crista's future, and in all of their futures. The Hylighter had turned in a superb performance. The flying fish now rested atop an oracle, an old one secured by a small but hardy Zavatan band. Its cavern, much larger than Flattery's, was occupied equally by the live kelp root and the Zavatans. Passage from the waterside was too dangerous for a foil. The humans had burrowed a passageway down from the top of the bluff to meet the kelp's burrow in the rugged rock near shore. It was identical to the oracle that lay at the foot of Twisp's command center beneath the high reaches. Flattery had scoured the kelp clean from his cavern to make it suitable to his tastes. He had destroyed one of the kelp's nests, a socket where the kelp rooted into the continent itself. Zavatans protected hundreds of these stations along the coastline, careful to keep Flattery's people at bay. Each oracle was a strategic kelpwork of communication, a link with the entire world and with the orbiter above it. The Immensity had learned from certain Zavatans how images are formed on the matrix of the human brain, and how its own flesh correspondingly formed the images that it saw against the dreamscape of the sea. When it had learned to project its thoughts, its images, as Rico LaPush projected his hollows to fill empty space, then it would commence the salvation of Avata and of humans. Woe to flattery, it thought. Woe to selfishness and greed. It dragged Rico inside the oracle and among his own kind as quickly as it could, so that he would not be unnecessarily fearful of his new pupil, Avata. What happiness could we ever enjoy if we killed our own kinsmen in battle? The Bhagavad Gita. When he announced after their midday ration that he would run the P, the Deathman's squad beat him up. They thought that would bring him to his senses, or at the very least make running around the demon-infested dash point physically impossible. It didn't work.
I don't know why you're doing this,
his squad leader told him. He was called Hot Rocks, and his sister was married to the Deathman's brother back in Lilywalp. They talked in private behind some boulders bordering Kalaloch's refugee camp.
Just like everybody else who does this, you're fed up with killing. You want to do something for somebody, leave your insurance to your family, right?
The Deathman just leaned back against the boulder and stared at a clear patch of blue sky scudding with the clouds.
Who gets your back pay? Your mom? Your brother? That little piece of blonde action you've been plugging in the camp?
The Deathman's hand snapped toward Hot Rocks but stopped still at his throat. Hot Rocks didn't flinch. Hot Rocks never flinched. My brother. Hot Rocks cursed under his breath, then whispered,
Wouldn't it be better to go back there? Tour's almost over. The worst is over. We're all going home in a month. 1 month. If you still feel this way,
he looked both ways,
then fight this thing at home. Work it out at home.
I'm no good for home, the Deathman said. The things I've done. I'm not normal. You're not normal. We can't go back there. We can't!
So instead of going home, you run the P. You make the dash out dash point and back. You know the odds. Lichter made it a month ago. Spit made it and collected a year's worth of food chits. 2 out of 28. It's suicide and you know it.
Either way, my family's better off, the Deathman said. His voice was a monotone, and Hot Rocks could barely hear him above the light breeze. I get my insurance and back pay if I don't make it, and the winnings if I do.
Yeah, Hot Rocks said, but they don't get what they want, which is you. If I come back without you, my sister will have my ass.
I can't go back. You know that. You of all people should know that. They should make a place for us, or let us go after these shadows and take over wherever they are and stay there, and then we won't have to hurt anybody anymore. The Deathman choked up, and Hot Rocks looked away. He peeked around the boulders and saw the rest of the squad near the beach, backs together, watching for demons or a shadow attack.
You're my brother-in-law, but let's forget that, Hot Rocks said. You're the best man I've got. These guys are alive today because of you. Doesn't that count for something?
It don't mean shit, the Deathman said. It means I've got more ears in my patch than anybody else. They throw rocks and garbage at us, and we hit them with laser guns and gush guns. Shit, man, if they were animals, we wouldn't even say it was good sportsmanship.
I think
you better stop thinking for me and start thinking for yourself, the Deathman said.
I've learned to kill here, but I haven't learned how to like it, and I sure as hell haven't learned how to sleep nights. Last I heard, there were no openings for assassins in Lillywalp. He stood up, brushed off his fatigues, and hefted his laser gun. Now this is how it's going to be, he said. I'm doing the running whether you'd let me take the bets or not. You gotta admit, a sizable winnings is good incentive, and I intend to add an attractive twist. Hot Rocks flicked his gaze around the beach, the cliffside, the tumble of boulders around them. This was hooded dasher country, and his caution was automatic. Besides, they'd burned out 2 boils of nerve runners here in the past week, and nothing gave Hot Rocks the creeps more than nerve runners.
Let's do it,
he sighed, and they joined the rest of the squad at the tide line. The bright afternoon suns ate away the tail of the daily squall and glistened off the wet black rocks of Dash Point. The narrow point jutted 3 kilometers into the ocean, and was named for its popularity as a place to run the P. Running the P was a game as old as Pandoran humans. The first settlers took bets, then ran unarmed and naked around the perimeter of their settlement, hoping to beat the demons for the thrill and a few food chits. Although technically illegal, it was a game resurrected by the Vachon security force. In the old days, survivors of the run tattooed a single chevron over an eyebrow to mark their success. Though this tradition, too, had been resurrected, the runs were set in places like Dash Point that were famous for high demon populations. The 2 in 28 that Hot Rocks had seen survive were exactly twice the actual average. "Bets are always 2 to 1, the Death Man said. "The 6 of you match my month's pay, and then that means that I get a year's pay when I get back."
When he gets back, McLean muttered. Listen to him.
Oh, I think that's Deathman again. "Well, I want 5 to 1, he said.
5 to what? 5 to what? You've been hit too hard on the head.
No way.
Shit, McLean said. For 5 to 1, he just might make it. I'm out.
Hear me out, gents, the Deaf Man said. See that big rock yonder off the point? Not only will I run the P, but I'll swim out to that rock and back for 5 to 1.
Stay awake, men,
Hot Rocks warned, and everyone swept the area quickly.
Standing here this long, we make excellent bait, remember that. Okay, let's get it on. Bets or not. Run or not.
I'm in.
Me too.
In.
Here's mine. Each of the men handed 5 of their food coupons to Hot Rocks to hold. Each coupon represented a month's rations in the civilian sector. The Death Man handed over 5 of his own against their 25. Hot Rocks stayed out of it, and the Death Man didn't press him. Do me 1 favor, the Death Man added.
Name it,
Hot Rocks said. Name that rock after me, he said. I want something around for people to remember me by. Rocks, they're a lot more permanent than people.
Deathman Rock, McLean chimed up. I like the sound of it.
Hot Rocks gave McLean one of his paralyzing stares, and McLean busied himself with sentry duty.
If you're going to do it, Hot Rocks said. Myself, I'd just as soon shoot you here as see you go out there. Stick around much longer and I just might.
Here's the paperwork, the Death Man said, handing Hot Rocks a small packet. Back pay, retirement, insurance all go to my brother.
Who gets the ears?
Fuck you. The Death Man reached into the neck of his fatigues and showed Hot Rocks the necklace he'd made out of the brown little dried out ears. Though human ears, they looked like seashells now, or twists of leather. He unfastened his fatigues and stepped out of them without a word. He handed Hot Rocks his laser gun and started running toward the point, dressed only in his boots. The heavy necklace spun around his neck like a Watts game hoop as he ran.
They took turns at sentry, keeping him in sight with the glasses.
"He's almost at the point," McLean reported. "What do you bet he leaves his boots on for the swim?"
The quiet one they all called Rainbow took him on for a month's worth. Everyone else was quiet, scanning the point with their high-powered glasses for signs of dashers, or, worse, nerve runners. Rainbow lost. They were all surprised when he made the rock.
Nobody more surprised than the Death Man.
Hot Rocks thought.
"Well, he's earned his place in history," McLean said and laughed.
The Death Man stood atop the offshore rock, yelling something that they couldn't hear and shaking his necklace of ears at the sky like a curse. The Dasher must have been lazing in the sun on the ocean side of the rock. The impact from its leap carried the Death Man and the Dasher a good 10 meters into the narrow stretch of sea off of the point. Some of the froth boiling up in the waves was green, so Hot Rocks knew that somehow, before he died, the Death Man had drawn Dasher blood. Neither the Death Man nor the Dasher ever came up. Hot Rocks paid off the debts and pocketed the Death Man's packet of paperwork. While he packed up the fatigues, the laser gun, and the rest of his brother-in-law's gear, none of his men's eyes met his own. He barked a few orders and walked flank while they finished their long sweep back to camp. Reveries, mad reveries, lead life. Gaston Bachelard. This was the dream Crista had endured for years, the one of her return to the arms of the kelp, cradled again in a warm sea. She rubbed her eyes and images flickered across the lids like bright fishes in a lagoon. Ben, beautiful Ben beside her, Rico in a cavern beneath them. There were others, fading in and out. "Crista!" Ben's voice. "Crista, wake up! The kelp's got Rico!" She blinked, and the images didn't go away. They were just overlain with more images like a stack of Watts drawings on sheets of cellophane. Ben knelt at the center of these things, holding her shoulders tight and looking into her eyes. He looked tired, worried. Scenes from his life dripped from the aura around him and spread out on the deck beside her. "I saw something around his waist, a tentacle," he said. "I think it pulled him into the water."
"It's all right," she whispered. "It's all right."
He held her as she got her wobbly legs under her. She breathed deep the thick scent of Hylighter on the air and felt strength pulse out from the center of herself to each of her weary muscles. Everything seemed to work.
"I see Rico," she said. "The kelp has saved him. He is well."
It's the dust, Ben muttered and shook his head. If the kelp has him, he's probably drowned. We need to get out of here. There are demons, Flattery's people.
"He doesn't believe me," she thought. "He thinks I'm...
A vision gelled in front of her out of thin air, one of Rico wet and gasping in the cavern. Rico tipped back his head and laughed, surrounded by friendly feelings. It was a side of him she hadn't seen. Someone approached him, a friendly someone.
"The Vatans," she said, cocking an ear. "They will be coming up from the caverns."
It's the dust, Crista, Ben insisted. It'll wear off. These are hallucinations. We've got to find Rico and get out of sight. Flattery's people
"Are here," she said. "They're already here. It's not hallucination," she giggled. "It's cellophane."
She had unraveled some cellophane in her mind, and she saw the sinister figures looking down from the cliff top. 2 of them. She reeled her vision closer and saw that she knew them both from Flattery's compound. Nevi and Zentz. Zentz's face and body were grossly misshapen. With Nevi, it was his soul. This she could see in the boiling black aura that seethed from him and sought her out. It sniffed the wind with its black snout like a dasher on the hunt. She felt Ben pull her backward through the rip in the flying fish. The bright sky trailing the storm forced her to squint and focus on a double rainbow that lazed in the sky above them. She wondered whether Ben might be right about the dust. The pink of the rainbow's arch blazed brightest of all the colors, and it pulsed in time with her own pulse.
"Do you see it?" she asked.
"The rainbows?" Ben said. "Yes, I do. Give me your hand. I'll help you down here."
"Don't rainbows mean something?" she asked. "A promise of some kind?"
Supposedly, God placed a rainbow in the sky as a promise that he would never destroy the world by flood again, he said. But that was Earth, and this is Pandora. I don't know whether God's promises are transferable. Here, give me your hand. The impatience in his voice just made her move slower.
"Rico's safe," she thought. "He doesn't believe me, so he's worried."
She shielded her eyes from the glare and scanned the cliff. The cliff top was identical to the one in her vision, except for a void, a nothingness where she'd seen the images of Zentz and Nevi. Another image of Rico in the cavern. She reached out for the kelp frond that had brought him there, and she felt him transported to the dead Hylighter at their feet. He stood there, facing them, head cocked and hands on his hips. It was as if he were impatient, waiting for them to make up their minds.
"Look there," she said to Ben. "Can't you see Rico?"
She pointed to his image, seating itself at the point where the Hylighter touched the sea. He was smiling at her for the first time and beckoned her with a finger. "I see the sun shining off the water," Ben said. "It's too bright to look at. You'd better be careful of your eyes."
"It's Rico!"
"We're dusted enough," Ben said. He stepped down from the foil to the ground and reached up for her. "Try not to touch the Hylighter. We're probably safest scaling the cliff."
"No!"
The word was torn from her throat before she could think about it.
"Not the cliff," she said. "I feel something there. I saw them up there, Nevi and Zentz. They're after us."
Ben pulled her free of the wreckage, and they stood on the unsteady footing of the slick rock beach. "Okay," he sighed. "I believe you. If not the cliff, then where?" She couldn't help looking at the sea. "We can't go there," he said. "Please don't ask me to take you there. Maybe you can live there, but I can't." He glanced quickly around them, biting his lip. "If you can see Rico, how do we get to him?" She couldn't resist caressing the remnant of Hylighter draped over the foil. Though a plant and clearly dead, it emanated a warmth that pleased her. It tickled something in her memory, something distant about her childhood. The kelp had protected her, nurtured her, educated her chemically in the customs of her fellow humans. She knew at a touch that this Hylighter was from the same stand. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the beach. She knew Ben was wise in some things, that she had to have faith in him. Without the kelp's cilia, she too would have died in the sea. Much was rushing back to her, in fragments and colors. What she wanted more than anything was to run for it, to bury herself in the kelp's great body, death or not.
"That is selfish," some voice warned her. "Selfish is no longer acceptable."
She had heard about the barrenness of the up-coast regions, and at first glance a black rock was all she saw. Sheer black cliff and black rubble, then a foaming churn of green sea. But there was life among the rubble. Little bits of green squatted among the rocks, clinging to crevices in the cliffside. Something, maybe the something that spoke inside her head, pointed her up coast.
"There."
She took Ben's hand and pointed out a huge black boulder with a single silver weehee clinging to its top. It was about 30 meters up coast, halfway between cliff and tide line.
"That's where we want to be."
That was when Nevi and Zentz stepped out from behind the boulder, laser guns drawn, picking their way across the rocks toward them. Crista wasn't surprised, nor frightened. She heard Ben mutter, "Shit," under his breath, and saw his head twitch quickly left to right, looking for a dodge. But she knew it wasn't necessary. She knew. The moment came together for her like a great conception. All the world silenced itself. The waves, the breeze, the cautious footsteps of two murderers clattering across wet stones.
Hands on top of your heads. Step away from the foil.
Zentz delivered his orders with a shaky voice tinged with slobber.
Yes, Crista told Ben, that's where we want to be.
They clung to each other's hands in the stone-still afternoon and watched the huge boulder lift itself back from the ground behind Nevi and Zentz. It came up smoothly, quietly, as though on hinges. Neither man heard a thing.
Hands on your heads.
The boulder laid itself carefully down behind them, and out of the shadows beneath it climbed a half-dozen men armed only with ropes and throwing nets.
Tell me you see it too, Ben whispered. Tell me I'm not still dusted.
It is as it should be, she whispered back, her voice a sing-song. There is a great moment at our feet, and it will not be stayed.
Something about the way Nevi's gaze met her own must have given it away. Without a backward glance, he sprang sideways, beachward, and whirled. The first net was already settling over the surprised Zentz, and another, poorly thrown, grazed Nevi's arms. Two flashes from his laser gun brought down both netmen, but Zentz flailed in a hopeless tangle. When Nevi whirled back, Crista Galli stared down the business end of his laser gun. Even at 30 paces, it looked huge.
I'll kill her, he announced, just loud enough for all to hear. Trust me, I am very quick.
Everyone froze, and in the silence that went with this stillness, Crista felt that they were all graceful subjects inside some great painting. She knew who the painter must be. Nevi half-crouched in careful aim, his colorful face unreadable, his eyes fixed only on Crista Galli. She felt her head clearing, the return of wave slaps against rock.
But there's something.
It wasn't something she hadn't felt since she'd been dredged up from the sea. It was something she hadn't felt since she'd been dredged up from the sea. Something familiar.
Connection,
she whispered. Ben breathed beside her, and she felt it as her own breath. They were one person, pulses synchronized with rainbows, waves, and the great heartbeat of the void. She knew the choices in his mind and marveled at the sacrifice he was prepared to make. She saw the play in his mind. Spin her by the hand, get between her and Nevi, take the hit while the netmen brought him down. At the moment he elected to move, she touched his shoulder.
No, she said, it's not necessary. Can you feel it?
I feel those sights on my chest, he said. He's the only thing standing between us and...
Destiny? She asked. There is nothing between us and destiny.
The image of Rico stood behind Nevi, gesturing wildly to her, still smiling. Nevi came out of his crouch, moved carefully across the rain-wet rocks toward them. She liked the smell of the rain, a different wetness than the smell of the sea, easier on the lungs, but not as rich. The scent of the sea, of the dead Hylighter, lay heavily beside her like a sleeping lover.
Do you see?
She asked Ben and smiled. I think I do, he said. Nevi barked a few orders, and two of the surviving netmen slowly began to disentangle Zentz. Crista Galli had that feeling again, the feeling of being a subject in a painting.
Be still,
she whispered. Ben didn't move. Nevi stopped walking. A look of surprise washed over his face.
Where are they?
He shouted, and he shaded his eyes even though the sun was to his back.
Where did they go?
Crista suppressed a giggle, and the figure of Rico applauded silently from behind Spider Nevi. I don't understand, Ben said. Are we invisible?
We're not invisible, she said. We're simply not visible. He can't pick us out of this landscape. I think it's a trick that Rico has taught the kelp."
Ben squeezed her hand and started to speak, but that was when the shooting started.
"I will this morning climb up in spirit to the high place, bearing with me the hopes and the miseries of my mother. And there, upon all that in the world of human flesh is now about to be born, or to die beneath the rising sun, I will call down the fire." Pierre Teilhard Desjardins, Hymn of the Universe. Twisp walked Kaleb to the flickering lights at the oracle's edge. This was a small cavern, a subset of the great root that Flattery had burned out a few thousand meters down coast. This was a hushed place, a place to breathe iodine on the salt air and feel the cool pulse of the sea. Kaleb trod the well-worn path with his father's bearing. Tall, shoulders back, large eyes alert to every nuance of light and motion. While his parents lived, no one had consulted the oracle as often as he. In the dim light by the poolside, Twisp saw that Kaleb's adolescent gangliness had transmuted into the epitome of athletic grace. "You are the man your father would most like to know," Twisp said. "And you are the man my father most liked." The two of them stood together at the poolside, watching the flickerings of kelp just beneath the surface. Both men kept their voices low, though the kelp chamber carried every whisper to its farthest crannies. Behind them, at a discreet distance, stood the complement of Zavatans who tended the pool. They busied themselves cleaning and reassembling one of the great borers that helped them tunnel out their habitations in the rock. "When your parents met, they were younger than you are now," Twisp said. "Is there someone in your life?" The perceptible blush that rose from Kaleb's collar reminded Twisp even more of the young man's father. Kaleb's skin was darker, like his mother's, but his naturally kinked, reddish hair was a gift from Brett Norton. "Yes, so there is someone?" "Victoria is a big place," he said. "I've seen a lot of women." His voice bordered on sullen, bitter. "A lot," Twisp mused. "And which one broke your heart?" Kaleb snorted, half turned away, then turned back to face Twisp. He was smiling. "Elder," he said, "you are truly a force to be reckoned with. Am I that transparent?" Twisp shrugged. "It is a recognizable affliction," he said. "I endured it myself one day. 30 years, and I still daydream." He didn't go on. It was more important that Kaleb do some talking. Kaleb sat at the poolside, dangling his feet in the water, caressing the kelp with his bare soles. "When I travel the kelpway and take my father's branch, I see you as he saw you himself. You were good to him, firm, kind, and you let him talk too much." Kaleb laughed. "He was a good man, I know. And you were a good man too." He bowed his head and shook it slowly. "I would like to be a good man, but I think I'm different. My life is different." Then he lowered himself into the pool and lay on his back on the kelp as though reclining on a great couch. His head and chest rested above water. Even in the colorful blue and red flickerings of the kelp lights about the cavern, Twisp could see a new life come into Kaleb's large eyes. "How are you different, Kaleb?" he asked. "You breathe, you eat, you bleed." "You know why we're here," Kaleb interrupted. His voice was firm now, none of the hesitation of youth deferring to age. How many people out there died today? How many people, how many people died out there today because they wanted to tear flattery apart but settled for tearing anything apart? Oh, that is Kaleb. How many people died out there today because they wanted to tear flattery apart but settled for tearing anything apart? Twisp remained silent, and Kaleb went on. I'll be truthful. I respect you. I want your respect for myself. I want your approval that what I'm doing is right. If this doesn't work, we will probably have to attack him, you know. His voice was becoming dreamy, and Twisp knew that the kelp was gathering him in, guiding him down the eddies of the past. Twisp steered him past thoughts of failure, past the matter that gave him the sense of failure. There is a woman who won't let you sleep, Twisp said. Tell me about her. Yes, Kaleb said, closing his gray eyes. Caleb's eyes, like his father's, emanated a maturity beyond his years. Yes, she's here. She had 2 watts before we met. Kita, she knew the kelp as you and I have known it, as an ally. She had other lovers, but I was her last, as she will be the last for me. This wrenched out of him with such an agonized moan. As she will be the last for me. This wrenched out of him with such an agonized moan that Twisp's hair raised up on his neck. Kaleb splashed the pool with both fists, but stayed immersed in the kelp, quieting with the caress of the waves.
Elder, Mose whispered, tugging at Twisp's sleeve, did you see his eyes?
Twisp nodded, and before he could respond, the kelp's display of flickering lights took on an intensity he'd never seen before. It was like one of the winter magnetic disturbances in the night sky, with great leaping rainbows of color that seemed to transcend water, rock, and air. Mose stepped back from the pool in fear, but Twisp reached a hand to stop him. Old friends, Twisp whispered. They are glad to see each other. Perhaps Kaleb's bloodlines led to this moment. His mother, Scooty Wang, and her mother before her had been the first 2 to communicate with the waking being that humans called kelp, and the kelp called Avata. When Twisp met Scooty Wang, she was a dark young woman passionately working in her mother's wake to reestablish the kelp worldwide. In her own words, she mathematiced the waves, and in doing so made current control possible, a system that saved thousands of islander lives and revolutionized travel in Pandora's seas. Scooty Wang was beloved by the kelp. This Twisp had heard from the kelp itself long before Kaleb was born. When Flattery attacked the kelp, lobotomized it, Scooty ordered her inheritance, Merman Mercantile, to stop trading with him. She and Kaleb's father were assassinated 3 days later. It seemed to Twisp that Kaleb took on his mother's features as he lay there in the pool. His hair appeared darker, and so did his skin. The kelp enveloped him as though he were in the palm of a giant hand. The lights around them leaped and danced to some silent music. Twisp recalled that day when Scooty placed her hands into the sea and pleaded with the kelp, "Help us," and it did. It saved their lives, and that moment had changed his life forever. It had changed all of their lives. In the years since Scooty's death, she had become something of a Pandoran historical monument, with many plaques and statues erected in her honor. When a massive earthquake ravaged the old current control site undersea, the carved glass statue of Scooty Wang was found intact, clutched in the fronds of a nearby stand of kelp. That sign of love from the kelp, that recognition of a symbol, enraged Flattery, and he entered into a vendetta against the kelp that continued to this day. Twisp watched Kaleb recline on the back of the kelp root, and it seemed as though the root surged up to cradle the young man closer. "Twisp," he called from the pool, "that was what my mother wanted to do, isn't it? Shut off all supplies to Flattery, starve him out. All these years I have hunted in vain for the day she died, and now I have it." Kaleb started to weep, and Twisp had a difficult time making out his words. "It would have worked then. It would have worked.
But now he owns everything. Everything! And now there is no way short of a miracle to reach all of the people at once. To get them all to shut him out would take a sign from God. His voice faded into a hum that seemed to keep time with the red and blue lights. Give me 1 sec here. I had a backup cover image so we can actually share more of them. I'll do a full slideshow for next week. I'll just have all the ones that I snagged. I think it's this one. Yes. Der Himmelfahrts Factor. Which is something like the heavenward factor, if translated literally. Increase the number of variables, but the axioms themselves never change. Algebra 2. Beatriz liked the feel of the free fall spin. She kept her eyes closed and imagined herself sprawled across one of those warm organic beds the islanders grew. She wanted to be in a bed like that now, with Dwarf MacIntosh, on some other world, under some other star. But of course, a bed like that made no sense in near zero-G. MacIntosh gave her one more gentle shove and drifted them both into the Webworks. This was a cavernous room at the orbiter's tubular axis, sometimes called the Privacy Park, often used for naps or meditation between duties, or for an occasional tryst by a desperate pair of lovers. A fine white netting crisscrossed the area, segmenting the huge space into a blur of booths and bins. Holoscenes turned some sections of webwork into fantasy worlds, further removing the occupants from the worries of life aboard the orbiter. All this Beatriz knew from her last tour, so today she kept her eyes shut tight. "The disorientation is lasting longer this time," she told MacIntosh. "I really don't want to open my eyes."
After what you went through today, I'm not surprised, he said. I wouldn't want to open them either.
She heard his fingers clicking at the keys on his belt messenger, and felt the sudden play of a warm light across her exposed hands and face.
Well, we're now at Port of Angels, that lush islander resort you've heard so much about. It's warm, feel it?
Yes, the movement of air across her cheeks was warm, caressing. She could imagine herself on the beach at Port of Angels, letting her hair dry in the suns and stirring a cold drink. A plate of mango and papaya slices waited at her elbow. There was no wave sound here in the orbiter, no pulse of the surf against her back that sometimes took her breath away. She opened her eyes. A sandy beach stretched away from her in both directions. Greenery poured over the cliff tops down to the beach, and several little huts waited under their thatched hats to cool her sun-drenched skin. As the two of them turned, the holo turned, responding to a reference point in the messenger. The holo came complete with their footprints in the sand, following them up from the edge of a blue-green sea. The fictional ferry that had transported them to this illusion had already settled under the waves, leaving only a swirl of current and a trail of bubbles toward the horizon. Sea pups yapped and dove from the rocks that lined the harbor, hunting fish startled out of hiding by the ferry.
We needed a few minutes alone, MacIntosh said. It will take more than a few minutes to clean up the mess up here, track them all down. We've got an exceptional crew, that's why they're up here. Warning's out, so this brood doesn't stand a chance.
He held one of the overlarge loops at her belt to steer them lazily inside. He held one of the overlarge loops at her belt to steer them lazily around inside the holo.
No one knows who the shadows are, he said. Do you?
No, I don't.
That's because the shadows don't exist. Ask any of them. They don't have meetings, pass messages, or recruit. Things simply get done. A power blackout, kelpway shift, and something of flatteries is lost.
Supplies circle him but don't land. Replacements don't show.
That's what I mean, Beatriz said. I want to know who does it. How do they know when to do it, and what happens? MacIntosh held her tether, and they spun in a lazy spiral through the webworks. The illusion that played across the nets, the beach resort, was tailored for her, designed to help reduce her orientation stress. He's at home up here, she thought. She was aware then that up didn't make the same sense now that it... She was aware that up didn't make the same sense now that it had... Okay. Yes, no, I had it right the second time. She was aware then that up didn't make the same sense now that it had a few hours ago.
They call it tossing the bottle. You throw something out to the waves and it's chance. But if you control the waves, or a little part of them, then it's not chance anymore, it's a sure thing. The Shadow's non-system encourages every citizen to frustrate flattery when they see the chance. Divert something this way, say a subload of hydrogen generators, and go about your business and never do anything like that again. Someone out in the waves sees this diverted load of generators coming along, diverts it that way, and in blinks it's headed up coast to a settlement of pioneers.
He spiraled a finger across the space they shared and bullseyed the palm of his other hand.
Delivery, he winked. Flattery's project loses and the people gain. No shadows, he smiled. It's brilliant, and everyone can play.
Yes. Again, her thoughts were with Ben. I wonder how long Ben's been playing.
The Zavatans, Rico, and Ben.
MacIntosh hesitated, choosing his words.
They don't want Flattery killed. They just want him removed. After all he's done to them, they still don't want to kill him, simply because he's a human being. Do you know how incredible that is? Do you know how far you Pandorans have come from us?
Our enemies on Pandora have always been more vicious than ourselves, she said, except for the kelp. The kelp has killed its share of humans over the years.
But who rattled its leash? MacIntosh asked. Who threw fire into its cage?
She closed her eyes again and breathed in slow, deep breaths.
Are you okay?
She breathed in and out again, slowly. I don't know, she said. I look around this scene, and I know it's manufactured, fiction, not real, but people are following us. There are lasgun barrels behind the rocks and plants. Out of the corner of my eye, I keep seeing people scurrying for cover. He hugged her, and they finally kissed that kiss that she'd been waiting for. This was no chap-lipped peck on the cheek. It was just what she needed to bring her back to the world. I've wanted to do that, she said, but it seemed out of place with all this death.
Yes, he said, I've wanted it too.
He brushed her lips with his fingertips.
You know, you're going to be jumpy for a while, maybe a long while. We're going to go back out there in a few minutes and finish this matter with Captain Brood. He might think otherwise, but his men have already discovered how little they know about getting around up here. Then we'll see what we can do about your friend's groundside.
You don't think they're dead?
No, he said, I don't.
How do you know?
The kelp.
Her face must have registered surprise because he chuckled.
You know how much the kelp interests me, he said. Since Flattery gave me current control, I've been able to experiment a little. It paid off.
He kissed her again, then told her about the kelp communication system he'd devised, and his attempts to unify the kelp.
Which kind of god would the kelp be? He asked. Merciful? Vengeful?
That's not important now, is it? She asked. Brood's a smart one. I won't be able to think of anything else until he's neutralized. MacIntosh steered them into a hollow of sky that unfolded throughout their webwork. 360 degrees of sky and high clouds covered the latticework that cradled them in freefall.
I worry more about Flattery, he said. Brood's small time. Flattery's got Flattery's got big things afoot, things big enough to crush anything in his path.
But he was a chaplain psychiatrist, Beatriz insisted. He's trying to be better than that.
He's trained to cope with the necessary thing and to see to it that we all adjust, he reminded her. No romantic bullshit, just the straight facts. He's programmed to see to it that we don't unleash a monster intelligence upon the universe.
If he hasn't adjusted and he hasn't coped, why assume that he'll take us all with him?
Simple,
MacIntosh said. When he smiled, his face wrinkled all the way up his shaved head.
The number five flattery hit the destruct switch. You've read the histories. That flattery was a lot more likable than this one. It's just that the program had already come alive, had already anticipated his move and headed it off.
Maybe we can do it. Beatriz tried to shake his shoulders, but all she did was set them both gyrating through the air. You're right. You're right. Use the kelp to head him off.
Well, now that it knows Flattery's out to get it, the program's already inserted, wouldn't you think?
Well, I have another possibility, and it's regarding Crista Galli. She felt a curiosity about Crista Galli that went beyond her newsworthiness. Ben saw something in Crista, something in her eyes that swept him up and further away from Beatriz. Even though things were finished between Ben and Beatriz, a woman who could do that, a younger woman who could do that, interested her mightily. What's that? What's that? She heard the rusty bitterness at the edge of her voice, the unnecessary snap of the words past her lips.
I think the kelps beat us to it, he said.
She looked up from her nestling spot at his neck to see his wide grin.
I think that Crista Galli is the kelp's experiment in artificial intelligence. I think she's manufactured, incomplete, and alive. It would be nice if we could keep her that way.
A musical tone sounded from the messenger at his belt. He did not take his arms from around her shoulders, but voice-activated the device with a simple command. Speak. Brood and 2 of his men sealed themselves off with the OMC. He says if you're not there in 5 minutes, he's going to start scrambling some brains. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight. Matthew Arnold, Dover Beach. The orbiter collared the void ship's nose in a flat, wide ring of plasteel. The 2 cylindrical bodies spun in concert on their long axes. Soon the ring would slip away to remain in orbit around Pandora while its void ship plied the dark folds of the universe. At the helm would be an OMC, a stripped-down human brain. The organic mental cores had a definite edge over the mechanical navigators, and this had been determined clearly long ago by experimenters at Moonbase. Navigation in all planes required subtleties of discrimination and symbol generation that hardware never achieved. The disembodied, unencumbered brain took pleasure, or so they said, in plotting the impossible course. One goad worked on OMCs that had no effect on mechanical navigators. The OMC needed this job to stay alive. The particular OMC that the techs were preparing for installation, the Alyssa Marsh No. 6, felt no pain or bodily pleasure as the micro-laser welded in the necessary hookups. She had been trained in astronavigation at Moonbase and had borne a child in the year after splashdown on Pandora. The story that she filtered back to Flattery had the child die in an earthquake, and Alyssa Marsh had launched herself into her kelp study project with a passion. Her body had been crushed in a kelp station accident, but Flattery saw to it that her silent brain lived on. Soon she would be silent no more. Soon her brain would have a body that it could move. The void ship Nietzsche. Of course it's called the void ship Nietzsche. Fucking flattery, pardon my French. She would navigate knowing the differences between ability and desire, knowing the need for dreams. Right now, she lay genderless behind a pair of locked hatches, dreaming of a banquet where flattery was the host, and she was both the honored guest and the main dish. Dwarf MacIntosh had gathered his forces outside both hatches and tried once more to contact Captain Brood. There was no reply from the OMC chamber. 3 of the 4 monitors inside were blacked out, but the one remaining showed an overhead view of the long, specialized fingers of a nerve tech probing the webwork that encased what remained of Alyssa Marsh.
Hookup's not scheduled until next week, someone said. What's going on in there?
A lasgun barrel appeared on the screen, pointed at the tech. The long, spidery fingers froze, then ascended from the surface of the brain toward the screen, then backed out of view.
That fool better not touch off his lasgun in there, somebody else drawled, or we be stardust.
Hold your fire, Captain, MacIntosh ordered. This is MacIntosh. You're in the high explosive area.
Brood's dead, a voice interrupted, a voice that cracked with youth and fear. May ship accept him! May ship forgive and accept us all!
The lasgun barrel tilted up toward the view screen, and in a flash the last monitor went blank. Beatriz tugged at Mac's sleeve.
He's an islander, she said. The old religion, like my family. Some believe this project, to build an image and likeness of ship, to be blasphemy. Some believe that the OMC should be allowed to die, that she, is a human being held here against their will and enslaved.
MacIntosh covered the intercom receiver with his hand.
I don't necessarily believe that Brood's dead, he told her. That would be too easy. And why shoot out the monitor instead of the OMC? You're an islander, you talk to him. Play the religion angle, set up to get him on the air if that's what he wants. My men here will help you out. Where are you going?
He saw the unbridled fear in her eyes at the prospect that he would leave her.
What have they done to her? He wondered.
He gripped her shoulders while his men floated the passageway, feigning inattention to their covert affections.
Spud and I know a few ins and outs of this orbiter that don't show up on schematic.
She held him as close as their vacuum suits would allow.
I could take anything but losing you, she said. I know I'm making a spectacle of myself in front of your men, but I couldn't let it go unsaid. I'm glad you didn't, he said, and smiled.
He kissed her in spite of the throat clearings, harumphs, and chuckles of his crew.
Chief Hubbard will stay here with you while his men secure this area. By your estimate, we're still missing a few of Brood's men. He's up to something. I have that feeling.
With a half salute to the chief, MacIntosh propelled himself toward current control with his compressed air backpack. Backpack, if that even comes across clearly over the microphone. I'm not entirely sure. I'm hoping it does. This new microphone is a bit clearer, which has pros and cons. Dark, unfeeling, and unloving powers determine human destiny. John Wisdom. Rico couldn't see through the illusion, and he knew that Ben could not see him either. Nor could Ben see Nevi and Zentz. Rico whistled the "get down" signal, hoping that the couple wouldn't run out of the boundaries of the image. They would be visible then, and in the open against an incoming tide. Rico dropped when Nevi started shooting.
Time to send him a more suitable surprise,
Rico thought. He wriggled into a position of better cover. Nevi laid a pattern of fire into the rocks that hid Ben and Crista. Zentz covered Nevi's rear, keeping the dozen local Zavatans pinned down. Nevi stopped firing, but kept his wary crouch.
Save charges, he warned Zentz. We might be here a while.
All was quiet except for their harsh breathing, the seething of the incoming tide, and the high-pitched ping of weapon barrels cooling. Rico was held firmly around the waist by a budding tip of kelp vine. It reminded him of his father's arm, and the way it used to pick him up off the deck in one swoop. The feathery bud of kelp felt like the palm of a small woman's hand on his belly, covering his navel, hugging him from behind. An image of Snej flashed through his mind, and just as suddenly Snej's face appeared in thin air, about 10 meters in front of Nevi. The rising tide licked at the Hylighter skin beneath her and kissed over Nevi's boot.
What the hell?
Nevi advanced a step, 2 steps. Zentz moved with him, backward, step for step. He glanced over his shoulder and paled when he saw Snej. He snapped his attention back to their rear defense.
The redhead, he gurgled. Where's the rest of her?
Rico found he could reinforce the intensity of the image by looking at it, concentrating on it. It was like a huge coil of energy feeding on itself, refining itself, awakening. After a couple of slow, calming breaths, he was able to materialize the rest of her. She stood there in her green single suit, hands on her hips, staring at Nevi. She was a bit larger than life size. He wondered if he could make her speak.
Well, Nevi said, she's here now. She's here now.
There's a comma there. I'm not quite sure how to read that.
Well, she's here now.
No, she's here now. She's here now.
Well, Nevi said, she's here now. Well,
I'm really hung up on this. My brain is like, it's too short a sentence.
she's here now.
Another glance over his shoulder, and Zentz began a wet, ragged breathing that Rico could hear a dozen meters away over the surf. He placed his back tight against Nevi's.
Shit, never your head that grows a body, he whined. Let's get back to the foil.
Shut up.
Nevi stopped and looked over the scene behind Snej. It was nearly the same view that Rico had. Black, rocky stretch of beach, between the tide and the cliff, a cluster of large basalt boulders, and a foil draped with the wet shards of an unexploded Hylighter. In the down-coast distance, the great expanse of sea glowed like green lava against the black cliffs.
Where are they? Where are they? Nevi asked her. I want them.
A two-toned whistle told Rico that the Zavatans were in position to rush the 2 men. He noticed that his illusion of Snej didn't cast a shadow.
Don't think I can manage that, too, he thought. Talking will be enough of a challenge.
Her shadow melted from her feet on the Hylighter skin to where it met on the beach, no more. It lay parallel with the other lengthening shadows of the day, but amputated at the rim of the skin. The tide already rushed the edges of the image, breaking up the light. With luck, Nevi wouldn't notice. Rico smiled, concentrating on Snej, and quickly thanked Avata in the back of his mind.
Put your weapons down, Snej said. It is finished.
But no sound came from her lips.
Shit.
Zentz responded with a burst from his laser gun. It came so fast that it startled Rico out of the illusion, and it pulverized a rock just a meter in front of him. Avata brought the lost image back. Nevi fired too, advancing them another step.
It's not real, he told Zentz. Watch yourself.
Maybe we're dusted,
Zentz said.
All this Hylighter crap.
Ever known 2 dusters to share the same hallucination?
Nevi asked. He stopped a pace from Snej, squinting.
Something's not right.
Rico held his breath. If Nevi stepped across the plane of the image, he'd see Ben and Crista, and Rico wouldn't be able to see Nevi. The entire area over the downed Hylighter became a dome of imagination, a hypnotism of light, a life sculpture. There must be a threshold of consciousness beyond which a conscious being takes on the attributes of God. Umbilicus crew member, void ship Earthling, from The Histories. Moses' eyes were opened so wide that he looked even smaller to Twisp than he had when a refugee band had carried him in half-starved 10 years ago. Memories. They kept him from the kelp as they drew Kaleb. Twisp had watched the struggle for nearly a quarter-century. The kelp must be like a drug to Kaleb. Not the kelp, Twisp thought. The past. Twisp knew, too, how the kelp always drew him to a particular part of the past, a particular year, a particular woman. Twisp had thought her the most beautiful woman on Pandora. Later, after Flattery and the others had been removed from the hive tanks, Pandorans got a look at unmutated humans for the first time in over 200 years. They were all so testy about being clones, Twisp recalled, when clone wasn't even something you could see. He remembered the bitter ceremony with Raja Lawn Flattery presiding, in which the hive tank survivors purged the telltale Lawn from their names forever. It was done with a ridiculous solemnity, and did not bestow on Flattery's people any of the attributes that Pandora demanded of them: better reflexes, more intelligence, teamwork. What they didn't tell you in school, Twisp told Mose, was that Flattery couldn't control Kareen Ale. She was killed, like Caleb's parents, by Flattery's death squad. She was the first victim. There are those who believe it was Nevi himself who did it. Shadow Peniel was head of current control in those days. He was in love with Kareen Ale. The combination killed him, too. He was my friend. Twisp's voice barely rose above a whisper. I quit searching the kelpways, finally. I prefer my memories the way they deal themselves out. The kelp keeps them too true. Memories are not the drug for me that they are for some. I prefer to go to the kelp for the now, not the them.
The kelpways would pink my wattles mightily, Elder, Mose said. The blue dust takes me to my heart and leaves me there sometimes. I don't know where it would leave me in the kelp.
With the dust, you face your own conscience, Twisp said. In the kelp, you face the conscience of us all. That does pink your wattles, all right. It demands truth and singularity of attention. One is easily lost in the cruel maze of someone else's life. Kaleb has learned to filter the kelp as we learn to filter our senses.
What will he find in there, Elder?
Twisp shook his head. The red, green, and blue lights intensified, and their flicker quickened until the cavern was awash with light. The border workers left their machine to stand at poolside with the others who had gathered in wonder.
I have heard of this, said one, but never have I seen the like.
Not even his mother, the great Scooty Wang, was such a one, said another. Twisp found it difficult to hold back the torrent of words that memory triggered at his tongue. Memories. They kept Twisp out of the kelp just as they drew Kaleb inward. The kelp was like a lifeboat to Kaleb, an anchor to Twisp. A strange mist coalesced above the top of the pool. Every atom in the cavern became charged with a visible hum, and everything above the waterline glowed in a cool green haze. Half-formed images, fragments of someone's past, flickered in and out of the haze. Twisp saw fire and a baby at the breast, a memo to Captain Yuri Brood, the brown sensual curve of a wet breast in candlelight. It was a tumble down a soundless tunnel, just the slosh and flip of the sea accentuating the drift. Twisp had the sense of reliving something, of déjà vu without the vu. He heard a voice out of the mist, a woman's voice.
He will contact one of the Upcoast oracles, it announced. There is news of Crista Galli and the others. Through me, Kaleb will meet my son, and through him, Raja Flattery. He will explore Flattery's inner being. Without secrets, he cannot rule, and with the kelp, there are no secrets. Kaleb will pick up the DNA path that leads to Flattery's hatch. Avata will transmit what he sees there throughout Pandora.
The whole cavern had become the stage for a giant holo-projection. Soon the babble and squall of life that went with the images swelled in the background. The mist had become a whirling ball of color and sound, its movements jerky and confused.
Kaleb must focus his attention, Twisp said. It is easy to get lost following the maze of someone else's life. He must filter Avata as we filter our senses. Then we will have a plan.
Yeah, shush.
Ransom, Frassum, Twitch chatbots, man. Whatever. It's gone now. One who withdraws oneself from actions, but ponders on their pleasures in the heart, such a one is under a delusion, and is a false swimmer of the way. Zavatan Conversations with the Avata. Queets Twisp, Elder.
Oh, one who withdraws oneself from actions, but ponders on their pleasures in the heart, such a one is under a delusion, and is a false swimmer of the way.
Zavatan Conversations with the Avata. Queets Twisp, Elder. Flattery took his afternoon coffee in the greens, enjoying an impromptu Let's try that again. Flattery took his afternoon coffee in the greens, enjoying an impromptu stroll among the orange-throated orchids. They clung to the rock clefts deep in the cavern, their blossoms a pastel cascade. Condensation dripped its paltry rain on leaves and wet rock, on the great flat surface of the pool. Kelp lights surged bright in the pool, reflecting in from the nearby bed. He paused a moment. This was something different, and the kelp, like Flattery, seldom did anything different. Flattery turned on his heel and dog-trotted back to his command bunker.
I ordered this stand of kelp pruned, he snapped, and jabbed a finger seaward for emphasis. I want it pruned now.
Marta snapped something into her messenger.
Not good enough, Flattery said. He signaled his personal squad. Franklin, see that it's done. Use the mortar unit down on the beach.
Aye, aye. Franklin carried a pouch at his waist. Inside were the sandals, papers, and diary of the first man he'd ever killed. He said he was saving them for the man's family. They would want them. Franklin slipped with a warrior's shadowy ease out of the hatch.
We can't loosen up now, Flattery told Marta. Everything will go perfectly if we don't get careless. That kelp bed is our only back door. We need it secure now. Do you understand my concern?
Marta nodded, then sighed.
Well, she said, I have some concerns of my own. Strange things are happening to communications.
What kind of strange things?
Random transmission sources of high-speed images. Hundreds of sources, strong ones, and they seem to be all around us.
They are all around us, he hissed. That kelp. Well, we've taken care of that. Damage news, orbiter news, Crista Galli news.
Nevi and Zentz have landed. They spotted the Galli girl and Ozette and anticipate no problem bringing them in.
LaPush?
Snatched by the kelp. The pilot was caught in our charges. Condition unknown.
Snatched by the kelp.
All this kelp talk was making Flattery nervous. He caught himself running his sweaty hand through his hair. Almac's gaze caught his own, and he knew that his guard had seen that moment of fear.
Kelpway's secure?
We think so, she said.
You think so?
Brood's squad is aboard the orbiter. No further reports. The holovision newsbreak was scheduled from the orbiter did not air.
We're on auxiliary power, the Colonel interrupted. Failure at the main plant. Shit, it's no wonder that these troops got through our security. They are our security. The Reptile Brigade, we called them. Shit.
Does that mean a code Brutus?
Flattery asked. The Colonel shook his head.
No, Director. This is an isolated unit of troops here. Their objective was the power station, and now that they've taken it, we expect them to defend it.
Defend it? Flattery raged. They don't have to defend it, they blew it up. What would you do if you were them?
I'd know that I'd crossed the Rubicon, the Colonel said. Since there's no turning back, I'd head right for the top.
Well, goddammit, take appropriate measures. Your ass is on the line here too, mister.
Marta flagged his attention. I ordered sub-coverage of the seaside entry doubled, she said. I received no confirmation and don't know whether they heard me. Also negative messenger contact with the beachside mortar. The response we get is gibberish. An icy panic tightened his stomach. Not the kelp, he thought. It can't be that. It has to be someone controlling the kelp. But who? The likely possibilities came to two. Dwarf MacIntosh, or the ambitious and resourceful Captain Brood. Crista Galli was an unlikely possibility. Suddenly, Flattery felt the full impact of this interference. We're cut off, he thought. Our whole strength was in coordination, and now we're cut off. A rally was clearly in order.
We got a little flabby, people, he said, a little careless. This harmless little exercise could have cost us our butts. Let's tighten up our action.
He'd caught them with their pants down, whipped them a bit. Now he'd have to coddle them, comfort them. Reports on the bomb in the upper office just in. He picked up Marta's messenger and held it over his head.
Dick and Matt are alive. The rest didn't make it. May the perpetual light shine upon them.
They all responded, May the perpetual light shine upon them, and drew a little closer out of reflex.
It could have been us, folks. It could still be us if we don't tighten up. Consider direct orders the only secure communication. Information in, nothing out.
Aye, aye. View screens and holo stages in his bunker began to flicker, barely perceptibly, then splashed high-speed displays of color throughout the room. Occasionally he glimpsed a face he recognized in the blur. It was his own face.
What do we know about current control? He asked.
His staff and guards stood transfixed in the surreal wash of color that visually drenched them all. They stagger-stepped to their posts, displaying the same disorientation that Flattery himself felt. Current control turned the kelp in Sector 8 loose, Marta reported. Then it turned loose all the kelp worldwide. Sensors now indicate that everything's intact. The kelp appears to be online again. High suspicion for Gridmaster failure.
Brood's mission?
No news. Holovision covered the launch site incident with a newsbreak report on the deaths of the Tatoosh field crew at the hands of shadow extremists. The colors that dazzled the room remained as bright, but their swirl slowed to a less dizzying rate. Flattery thought he detected a woman's voice, faint in the distance, somehow familiar, almost as though she called his name. Continued fighting in food distribution centers, Marta said. Too many looters to shoot. The usual "we're hungry now" crowd. Some of our people have opened warehouses. All stores outside our perimeter have been breached.
That's thousands of shuttle loads of food, he bristled. That's my contingency, my lifetime void ship supply. Dried grains to feed 3,000 for 10 years, he said. Dried fish enough to feed 50,000. Add water, pat together and cook. Instant wine. Add a package to a litre of plain water and stir. Bread and fish for the multitudes. Water into wine. If this void ship could time travel, I could be Jesus Christ himself. Shit.
Consciousness, the gift of the serpent. Raja Lawn Flattery, number 5 model. Ship records. A lean-faced security, armed with both stun stick and laser gun, blocked MacIntosh at the hatchway to current control. "Halt!" He motioned Mac and his men to stop, gripped a handhold to keep his bearing.
"Orbiter Command," Mac said. "Who the hell are you?"
"Security," the man said, and emphasized the point with his laser gun.
Captain Brood has the details. We are under the director's orders to secure current control.
MacIntosh pushed off from the bulkhead behind him and sprang the gap. A push to the shoulder and a spin to the wrist later, MacIntosh had both the stun stick and the laser gun. The sputtering security was pinned head down against the passageway bulkhead by 2 of Mac's firefighters.
You'll get the hang of it in a day or 2, MacIntosh said and smiled. "If you live that long. Whether you live that long depends on how much you tell me right now."
That's all I know,
he said, his voice edging a whine.
"Airlock time,"
Mac said. His men tumbled the security down the passageway to the freight airlock adjacent to current control.
No, don't do this,
the security pleaded.
That's all I know. That's really all I know.
"How many in your squad?"
16.
Mac opened the inner hatchway to the airlock.
"My information says different. How many came up on this load, and are there more already aboard?"
It's just us, Commander. 16 troops and 16 techs.
"Where are they?"
Silence.
"Airlock time, gentlemen," Mac said. "Let's decompress slow. Anything you might think of to tell us, you can tell us from inside the lock. We'll stop decompressing when we've heard the whole song."
As Mac spun the hatchdog closed behind the security, he saw a half-dozen more of his men step off the elevator in full gear. Mac twisted the dial that sent air hissing audibly from the lock. His prisoner immediately became hysterical.
Shuttle crew is ours, he said. 2 troops, 3 crew stayed aboard. Hollow crew is 2 troops, 3 techs. OMC crew was 3 troops, 2 techs. Current control, 4 troops, 4 techs. Counting myself and Captain Brood, the rest secured the void ship. Please don't count the air out. Don't put me out.
"Keep him in his side in case I change my mind," Mac ordered. "We can add to our collection here as things develop. We need Brood so we can find out what Flattery's up to. Hooking up the OMC, taking over current control in the void ship. Sounds like things are going worse for the director than he lets on. Maybe he's getting ready to take the void ship for a little spin around the system."
The intruder code, a tone and light warning, flashed at all corridor intersections. It was a drill that Mac had never taken seriously, now wished he had.
"Right, you and your people take the shuttle. Barb, you work the void ship and know it better than anybody here. Take Willis and these engineers. Remember, no laser guns. You have your vacuum suits on. Use them. The rest of us will handle this little nest here. If Flattery doesn't trust us anymore, let's make it worth his while."
Mac knew that he had the edge over Brood as long as they met in the near-zero gravity in current control. Brood's techs might figure out the old hardware that ran current control, but the new organic hookups throughout the orbiter and ship, grown by islanders specifically for MacIntosh, might be a surprise. These kelp fibers bent light and encoded messages chemoelectrically within cell nuclei. This enabled kelp to bring light to the ocean depths and messages to the orbiter. The switching speed and capacity of kelp hookups far outstripped any hardware that Pandorans had developed.
"Too late, Raj," Mac thought. "Current control will never be the same."
Brood could only fail. In the time it would take his techs to figure out Mac's secret system, they would all be grandparents. I think that's where I was going to leave it. Let me just double check here. Yes. Actually, How long has this one been running? I can do one more. I'll do one more chapter. It's a little longer. This was always going to be a shorter one, but that's okay. I think this might be a misprint, but it says, "The is holy, and the void is home." Huston Smith. Or Houston Smith. I'm not actually sure how that's pronounced. Yeah, it says, "The is holy, and the void is home." The is not italicized, so I suspect it's a misprint in some way. Anyway, "The is holy, and the void is home." Huston or Houston Smith. Hot suns melted through the thick post-squall mist to scorch the albino nose and exposed arms of Crista Galli. When an offshore gust caught the mist in a whirl, it freshened her hot skin like silk. She had felt the whoomp of breakers in the surf beyond the fog, and now she could see just how close the waves really came. "Tide's shifted again," Ben told her. He held her right hand, but his voice sounded empty with distance, thick-tongued. He blinked a lot, and his motions were slow, exaggerated.
"Dusted," she thought. "I wonder how it feels."
She was convinced now that the dust had returned her to reality, rather than removed her from it. It was her personal antidote, an anti-amnesiac that spun valves and opened the stream of memory. She remembered Zentz, too. He had been a mere captain when he came into the lab at the preserve that made up her home. He took away the researcher who was talking with her at the time, a young islander woman who taught social psychiatry at Taolini College. Once a week, Addie came to question Crista about her dreams and always spent the afternoon with her in the solarium over tea. Crista had awakened in that lab a 20-year-old female human without a single memory. The psychiatrist, Addie Cloudshadow, tried to get those memories back. In the process, she became Krista's first friend. Because of Zentz, Crista hadn't dared another friend until Ben. Zentz had walked into the lab that day with his weapon drawn, said simply, "Come with me," and shot Addie just outside Krista's hatch. Crista was sedated through her hysteria, and Flattery promised to take care of Zentz. 4 years later, Zentz surfaced as Flattery's chief of security, and Crista vowed to escape the preserve. Today, the mist kept her from seeing either up or down the beach. That glimpse of Zentz would have terrified her a day ago, but today she was not afraid. Something in the flash of kelp memory warned her of Nevi, the other shadow in the mist, but it also illuminated a tension between the two that she knew worked to their favor. The kelp had replayed for her Nevi's refueling incident, and she'd even forayed briefly into Zentz's mind. She had never seen anything so filled with horror and fear. She felt hate there, too, but it had long ago given way to a fear of Flattery that, itself, became an intense personal fear of Spider Nevi.
"Divided they fall," she thought.
Flattery's world was coming apart, fighting itself, dying a thrashing death faster than it could inflict death on others. This was what Zentz had seen when the kelp grabbed him, and only Crista knew the strength of his resolve not to die at Flattery's feet or at Nevi's hand. Crista had one open view from where she stood in the rocks, over the boil of breakers and out to sea. Though the tidelands wallowed in their salty fog, the sea itself glistened out to meet the sky somewhere in the distance. As far as the eye could see, huge fronds of kelp rose lazily from the sea and splashed lazily back. Crista found comfort in the play of the kelp and the infinity of the horizon. "What a time to be dusted," Ben mumbled and shook his head.
"Rico has a plan," Crista whispered, "and he's ready to start it right now."
Crista Galli felt her hair prickle when Rico's electric dance of light crackled up like a shield around her. The high suns roiled fog off the wet beach and coated her skin with a fine grit of salt. The mist enhanced the surreal quality of Rico's life-size hologram. From the backside, it was like looking through a fogged mirror that refused her reflection. Crista watched the barest shadows of Nevi and the others as they ghosted the boundaries of this hollow image that erased herself and Ben from the visible landscape. Nevi and Zentz positioned themselves behind the light curtain, calling out strategy codes to each other.
Flank sweep, left, Nevi said.
His voice was unhurried, precise.
Cover high. I'll take point and ground.
But they disappeared.
It's a trick, Nevi said. A camera trick. They're in there and can't get out. Position?
Secure. 10 meters. Left flank. I can't see shit in this soup.
Zentz spoke more with a gargle than with real words.
Ozette, Nevi called. She's sick. She goes back or she dies. You know that. It's not a choice. Send her out.
Ben's finger went to his lips. He can't see us, Ben whispered. Don't move. She couldn't tell one person from the other. The gigantic hollow danced on its curtain of mist. Surreal figures outside the hollow field became a futile blur. 3 lasgun flashes burst the curtain of rippling light, and a cascade of prisms lighted up all around her. Ben pulled her to the ground, and in a blink, the image reformed.
Stay low and don't move, he whispered. This is the perfect hollow. Perfect.
She wriggled with him into a fold of Hylighter against a black lava boulder. Though faint, a wisp of images rose out of the Hylighter skin and filled her mind in a steady unraveling of Pandora's tangled politics. The thick skin of the Hylighter held the warmth of afternoon sunlight. With Ben tucked close against her, she felt safe. Flashes of sunlight sparkled intermittently throughout the hologram that surrounded them. Crista drew a new strength with the Hylighter's touch, and a confidence that insisted Nevi would fail.
He can't see us as long as we stay inside the image,
Ben whispered. His voice strained with the effort of focusing through the dust coursing his veins. He kept low, but his quick eyes took in all of the scene that they could.
This is incredible. He marveled. We're inside a hollow. Where the hell did he get the triangulators to bring this off? And the resolution?
From the kelp, Crista said. He got everything he needed from Avata.
I wish we could see what the hell's happening, Ben whispered. Right now we're inside a hole in the light show. See this edge here? Rico's hollow follows the outline of our Hylighter. He's made a stage out of a Hylighter skin.
His finger reached out to the edge of the Hylighter skin and appeared to disappear as he pushed it through the hologram. A momentary flutter of light and shadow around his finger was the only sign of disturbance of the image.
The mist makes the illusion especially colorful, he said. All the tiny flashes that you see are the lasers catching a water droplet spinning in the mist. Kinda pretty.
I can take her back dead or alive, Ozette, Nevi's voice insisted.
It was closer now, only a few steps away.
If she's dead, the world will think you killed her. If she's alive, well then everyone gets another chance. Going back there, she whispered. That is not living.
Don't worry, he knows how it's got to be.
3 more flashes burst through the light screen and pitted the boulder above them in a dazzle of red and violet. Ben wrapped his arms around Crista to sandwich her between himself and the rock. It seemed that the dust was bringing her out of a dream instead of into it. She felt her head and senses clear beyond anything she'd experienced in Flattery's custody.
I think the dust, you were right about it, she told Ben. It's offset whatever it was that Flattery gave me.
She pulled Ben's arms tighter around her and felt as though she were melting into him, her busy atoms scooting between the oscillations of his own. She felt herself disassemble into her qualities of light and shade. She was no longer so much a substance as an idea, an image, a dream. She felt no pain or pleasure, just a sense of transmission, of movement with purpose over which she had no control.
Ben, she asked over a stab of fear, Ben, are you here?
Yes. His breath puffed her ear. I'm here.
I'm sorry,
she said. She knew something was coming. Some feral intensity crested her awareness and would not be cowed.
I'm sorry.
A sensation like the one she had felt at the dockside in Kalaloch welled up inside her, then burst with a loud crack that rolled outward from her heart like angry thunder. Everything around her stilled except the wet rush of the incoming tide.
Welcome home, Crista Galli.
The voice spoke through her mind without the impediment of sound. It came at a rush from the dying Hylighter, from Avata itself. A refreshing sense of detachment, then a familiar disembodiment overcame her. The distinction between Hylighter skin and her own blurred. She was encompassed within a familiar tingle. It was a muted, struggling tingle that she knew to be a kind of death in body that hatched the great Hylighter of her mind. Her mind flexed its great sail in the sun and caught its first breath.
We hatched of the same vine, Crista Galli.
She remembered now. Before the bombing that cut her free, she had been rooted for safety in a pod of kelp. The memories filled her head so fast they stunned her. Ben's groan in her ear filled her head Ben's groan in her ear reeled her attention back to their huddle on the beach. The hollow was gone, and enough of the mist lifted to reveal a scattering of bodies in the rocks.
I thought I was dead, Ben said, rubbing his temples. What have you done?
Crista couldn't answer. She felt as though she straddled two worlds, one on the beach with Ben and one in the sea with her great guardian, Avata. The hollow had switched off with the thunderclap, and Nevi lay on the beach, nearly within her reach, his eyes blinking stupidly and blood oozing from his red-veined nose. She got up slowly and retrieved his lasgun. Rico, though wobbly, was the first to recover, and he did likewise with Zentz.
My apologies, sister, Rico said with a slight bow and a quizzical smile. There is much this ignorant brother did not understand.
He reeled and nearly fell, but caught the side of a great rock and steadied himself. Others around them, the stunned ones, began stirring and shaking their heads. A few, victims of the lasguns, would never stir again. She felt bigger now, taller, and it seemed that even Rico looked up to her. A deep breath of the mist-laden air cleared her mind and helped her pulse a new strength to her young legs. The tide hissed up to her feet, and a few meters away it licked Nevi's outstretched form in the sand.
So, Rico, do you still want to keep me from the kelp?
He managed a laugh and shook his head.
2 rules, he said. The first, never argue with an armed woman.
She hefted Nevi's lasgun as though seeing it for the first time, then inquired,
And the second?
Never argue with an armed man.
She returned the laugh, and Ben joined them. You argued with Nevi, Ben said, and look what it got him.
I didn't argue with him, Rico said. I tricked him. That is, Avata tricked him. Now we've got more work to do. Believe it or not, we have to save Flattery. If we don't...
Save Flattery? Ben's bitterness dripped from his voice. He started all this. He should suffer the consequences.
Not if we all suffer, Crista said. Not if human life on Pandora is extinguished. He can do that. I feel it. Rico is right. Flattery must be stopped, but he must stay alive.
The dozen stunned Zavatans struggled to regain their feet and their senses. Ben picked up Nevi under the arms and dragged him out of reach of the water. A Zavatan scout took over and trussed Nevi's thumbs together behind his back with a stout length of Maki leader. That hollow, Ben said. I've never seen anything like it. How did you do that?
I thought you'd never ask,
Rico said. He picked up a length of kelp vine from the water's edge, caressed it momentarily, and then dropped it back into the sea.
That was the trick. I think our Zavatan friends here have these two zeros under control. Follow me. I'd like you to meet my friend, Avada, the greatest holo studio in the world.
A warning shout went up from a scout at the cliff top, and simultaneously a hunt of dashers splayed out of the upcoast mist in a sinister blur. Ben snatched the heavy laser gun from Crista's hand and pushed her toward Rico. He fired a quick burst, and the barest scent of ozone accompanied the snapping of the weapon. Two dashers crumpled in a flurry of screams and sand only a dozen meters away. The others began to feed on their dead, as was their instinct. A Zavatan scout emptied his charges into the rest of the hunt.
They're so fast,
she gasped, and discovered herself clinging to Rico's arm. He did not cringe or push her away, but put his arm around her shoulders and gave her a squeeze.
Not much time to think, topside,
Rico said.
Then to Ben, I see you're still quick in your old age.
Some of us stay young forever, he laughed. Must be the company I keep. Ben's hand took her own, and the three of them caught their collective breath.
If they're not too chewed up, we'll get you one of those hides for a souvenir,
Rico told her.
What would I do with a dead thing? She asked.
A huge, cold finger ran a shudder down her spine.
I'm a lot more interested in life.
Touché, Ben said. Let's get going. I want to look at Rico's mystery studio. A gust of breeze puffed the last of the mist off the tidelands, and both afternoon suns caressed Crista's pale skin. The fabric of her dive suit rippled in sunlight as the tide reclaimed, amoeba-like, the tumble of rocks that marked its upper reaches. With her hand clasped in Ben's, she followed Rico as he scrambled away from the sea up to the cliff. Two Zavatan scouts in green single suits flanked a great entryway between boulders.
In here, Rico said. It's not nearly as scary as the way I came in. Watch your step. The wet rock is mighty slick.
Crista stood at the dark entry, feeling a pulse of damp air rush out at her. A series of carvings decorated the wall inside, carvings of intertwined kelp vines, fishes, and suns. She turned her face upward for one more dose of light before facing the darkness. Look there, Ben said, pointing skyward. Hylighters. And they have the foil that these two came in on. A half-dozen of them appeared from somewhere landward, two of them cradling the shiny foil in a snarl of tentacles. They all dropped in lazy circles to within 100 meters of the beach. They valved off their hydrogen, fluting their peculiar songs that included one long, shrill, all-clear whistle. The great sails fluttered and snapped, tacking the coastal breeze. Sunlight through their sail membranes made them glow a dusky orange, and even this far away she could make out the delicate webwork of their veins.
Guardians of the Oracle, one of the Zavatans said. They, like you, are sent by Avata to help us. There is nothing to fear.
It seemed to her that their flutings called, Avata, Avata, on the wind.
Come, Rico said. Let these guys mop up. There isn't much time.
They passed through the high portal of carved rock, and, though she had expected darkness, they entered a chamber of magnificent light. The light came out of the pool itself, fanning out from the kelp, and, like the warm breeze on her cheeks, it pulsed ever so slightly as though it, too, were alive.
Avada brought me in through the sea, Rico told them. There's an entry through the kelp itself into the pool. The entry closes off as the tide rises, then opens again at ebb. I just squeaked through. As you can see, it's well occupied.
The strong sea smell of the beach had been replaced with the scent of thousands of blossoms, but there were no blossoms in sight. A kelp root rose out of the pool at the center of the cavern, crowding all the way to the high domed ceiling. The root comes out of the ceiling, Ben said. This rock was folded upside down during the quake of '82. Look at that monster. She saw that it was true. It did not rise out of the pool, but dropped into it. The top portion of root, 30 meters or more above their heads, was indistinguishable from the rock it clung to. Around it sparkled the thousands of reflections from its mineralization.
"This is an old one," she said, craning for a good look. "A very old one."
The cavern walls were terraced up to where the root joined the ceiling. The terraces were cultivated, and thick fruit vines carpeted the walls. A welcoming committee in brightly embroidered costumes smiled down at her from among the greenery. As the three of them stepped from the passageway to the edge of the pool, applause broke out, and the chant of "Crista! Crista! Crista!" pulsed with the brightening light. "Look at yourself," Ben said over the din. "You're glowing." It was true. Except for where his hand held hers, a light surrounded her body. It was not a reflection of the glow of the kelp on her white skin and white dive suit, because the pulse of this light matched the throb of her own heart. She felt stronger with every beat.
"Thank you," she said, bowing to the crowd. "Thank you all. Your hopes for a new Pandora will soon be fulfilled."
She stepped to the edge of the pool and became one with its emanation of white light, and felt herself enter again the great heart of Avata. It was as though she opened 1,000 eyes throughout the world and looked everywhere at once, and with some of these eyes she watched herself watching Avata at the pool. She heard her voice rise to fill the cavern with a richness it had never held before.
"Fear is the coin of flattery's realm," she announced. "We shall buy out his interest in kind."
Images leaped from the pool's surface at the sweep of her outstretched arms and filled the cavern like quick, bright ghosts. Her body swelled to its limit in the seas, and she reached her thousands of arms skyward in joy. A gasp escaped one of the sentries, then a shout. "The kelp! Look at the kelp!" But no one had to go outside for a look. It was all played before them inside the cavern. Throughout the seas of Pandora, the kelp reached its great vines high above the surface. Colorful arcs of light bridged the gulfs between stands. Even Hylighters trailed great streamers of light from their ballast, providing a link between isolated patches of wild and domestic kelp alike. Rico smiled through the dazzle of light, and Crista realized the difference between the Rico she had first met and the Rico who had saved them on the beach. This Rico was happy. "You're looking at Avata!" he shouted. "The kelp has risen! Long live Avata!" Applause and exclamations of joy gave way to the heavy background rhythms of water drum and flute. "But how?" Ben swallowed his question back, his eyes desperately trying to follow the display that surrounded him. A parade of ghosts from all over Pandora washed among the people in the cavern like a hologrammatic tide. "Like the kelp ways of the mind," Rico explained, "only it's no longer just a function of touch." Rico turned to Crista and took both her hands into his own. The light around them leaped even higher. "Though it seemed like moments, I was gone from you for years," he said. "I witnessed your life, my life, Flattery's life. He buried a secret in his own body that would kill the kelp should he die. If his heart stops, a trigger releases his stockpile of toxins worldwide. It would paralyze the kelp in moments and kill it all off in hours. You see now we must isolate him, stop him, save him from his own ignorance. Enter the kelp. Tell the world what you know." Crista felt herself pulled to the edge of the pool, and a murmur swept the chamber when she stepped onto the thick root of kelp. What she felt in that instant was joy. She became the very force of life in all of those present, and she entered the being of a young Kaleb Norton-Wang. In blinks, the webwork grew. In oracles throughout the world, people consulted the kelp, and she entered the minds of them all as they entered her own. It was more a giving up of mind, a joining of the piece to the whole. She felt as though she spun like a mote on a current of air, and filaments of light snaked out from each of her cells into the world. One of them, from the center of her forehead, reached beyond the world to touch the faithful above it. From her perch aboard the orbiter, she watched Pandora's seas become a shimmer with light.
So you see, Crista Galli, the voice inside her said, the severed vine regrafts itself. In you the parts are joined, and Avata is much more than the sum of its parts.
And that is where we will leave it for this week. Right before the end. Next week will be the final installment of The Ascension Factor by Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom. So we have that to look forward to very much. What we don't have to look forward to, unfortunately, is a Monday stream. I forgot that it is Indigenous Peoples Day, and I will have work that day. So I will not be around for that, regrettably. So people will have to just wait a little longer. I will see... I'm strongly contemplating switching Mondays to Tuesdays, but I'm going to have to come up with something suitably, pithily... what's the word I'm looking for? Alliterative. There we go. I lose the language centers of my brain when I do this stream. It all goes into reading and just doesn't really go into thinking. It's a Zen state thing. Or I'm getting high. I don't know. I'm getting high off my own brain juice reading, which is good enough, I guess. I am seriously contemplating switching it to Tuesday because being like 4 weeks behind, or 4 episodes behind for Monday streams compared to Friday streams is kind of driving me up a wall a little. But that's okay. I'll any changes of that sort I'll do at the end of this year or the start of next year, whenever I get to a new book at that point, and I'll contemplate doing some changes at that point. Other than that, hopefully people are enjoying this last of the Pandora sequence. We've had tons of callbacks to Destination Void in this one, so it's been quite a trip. But we've still got a bit more to go. Not a lot. It'll be shorter next week, but that's okay. But with that, I'm going to leave you all, other than me not being there on Monday. Oh, Wednesdays. Right, for Wednesday, I didn't know what I was going to do. Possibly as a treat, I will blind read the Enshittification book by Cory Doctorow. Because my copy just came in. So, that is a definite maybe. I may decide against it at the last minute, because I do prefer to have read things myself beforehand. But we can still do that. And we can deal with whatever interesting revelations he has there on all terms. They will be revelations to me, because I won't have read it yet. Anyway, with that, I'm going to leave you all. Stay safe, stay sane, be toasty or cool as per your preference and geolocations permit, and be decent to each other. See you all later. Toodaloo.